I see you sitting alone in that quiet room, the weight of absence pressing against your chest like a stone. The chair across from you remains empty, the phone silent, the messages unanswered. I know how the walls of your home have become both sanctuary and prison, how you count the hours by the shadows moving across the floor. I have walked this path of solitude before you, when everyone disappeared, when the crowd that once surrounded me vanished like morning mist. I too felt the sting of abandonment pierce my heart. This pain you carry is not a punishment, it is an invitation. God has cleared the stage of your life not to leave you in emptiness, but to finally speak to you without the noise of others drowning out his voice. I remember the night I sat alone in my chamber in Kanya, the oil lamp flickering shadows across the walls. My heart as vacant as the desert under moonlight. It was a silence that roared like thunder, a loneliness that felt like drowning on dry land. My beloved Shams had disappeared, and with him, I thought all light had gone from my world. My students had scattered, uncertain what to make of a teacher suddenly broken by grief. My family watched me with worried eyes but could not reach the depths where I had fallen. I paced the floor until my feet ached, recited prayers that felt hollow on my tongue, and finally collapsed into a silence that seemed to have no bottom. It was in this abandonment that I learned the first great truth of the spiritual path. Loneliness is not the absence of connection, but the preparation for a deeper one. God allows the field to lie fallow, so new seeds may be planted. He empties the cup so it may be filled with something purer than before. I placed my hand on my chest and felt the rhythm continuing despite my sorrow. Something remained alive within me, a small flame that would not be extinguished by the winds of loss. And in that flame, I sensed a presence more intimate than any human companion could provide. The desert fathers knew this secret, as did the hermits in their mountain caves. Solitude is not punishment, but purification. The empty space around you is not God's absence, but his patience, creating room where he may finally be heard. We mistake the clearing of the garden for abandonment when it is actually preparation for a new season of growth. I learned to stop filling every moment with noise, every corner with distraction. I learned that prayer begins not with speaking, but with listening, not with demanding, but with surrendering the very demand itself. I took small steps toward embracing this sacred solitude. Each morning, I would sit on my prayer rug as dawn broke over Kanya, and instead of reciting verses by memory, I would listen to my breath flowing in and out like the tide. I would feel the air touching my nostrils, cool as it entered, warm as it left, carrying with it the heaviness in my chest. I did not try to control the thoughts that arose. I watched them like clouds, passing across the sky of my awareness, neither clinging nor rejecting. Sometimes tears would come, and I would let them fall without shame, knowing they were prayers without words, more honest than all my eloquent supplications. When visitors eventually returned, seeking wisdom or comfort, I received them differently. I was no longer desperate for their presence to fill my emptiness. I no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. I had discovered a wellspring within that could not be taken away by anyone's departure. This is the gift hidden in your pain today. This terrible loneliness carries within it the seed of a freedom you have not yet imagined. The freedom to be fully present without dependency, to love without grasping, to give without expectation of return. Try this simple practice. For 5 minutes each day, sit in complete stillness. Place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Feel the breath moving like a gentle wave through your body. Do not try to control it. Do not try to force peace. Simply witness this miracle of life continuing within you, independent of your will. In this witnessing, you participate in a form of prayer older than words, more fundamental than ritual. You join every creature that breathes in, acknowledging the gift of the present moment. This is the beginning of healing. God does not abandon his creation, beloved soul. Even in the darkest night, the stars continue their ancient dance above the clouds that hide them from your sight. Even in your deepest loneliness, the divine presence pulses within you like a hidden stream beneath desert sands. What you perceive as absence is often presence in disguise, waiting to be discovered through different eyes. As I often tell those who come to me with hearts heavy with abandonment, the wound where love has left becomes the opening where God enters. The space that feels so painfully empty is precisely where the beloved has room to dance. When I lost Shams, I lost my external teacher, only to discover the teacher within. When friends departed, I lost companions, only to find companionship with the friend who never leaves. This is the paradox at the heart of spiritual solitude. In losing the many, we find the one. In releasing our desperate grasp on others, we open our hands to receive what cannot be taken away. Remember this truth I learned through tears and eventually carried in my heart like a precious jewel. Loneliness, faced with courage, transforms into solitude, and solitude embraced with love transforms into communion with the divine. Now, when you feel that ache of emptiness pressing against your ribs, place your hand there gently. Breathe into that space. Say to yourself with tenderness, "This hollow place is becoming a vessel. This absence is making room for presence. This silence is not the end of the conversation, but its true beginning." The beloved speaks most clearly when all other voices have gone quiet. The heart hears most deeply when it has stopped straining for human approval. Your solitude is not abandonment. It is a sanctuary being prepared for a sacred encounter. The wounds you carry are not merely injuries to be hidden. They are openings through which the light enters your being. I remember the day my heart was torn by the absence of Shams, how the pain seemed to split my chest like lightning splits the sky. I walked the streets of Kenya with my eyes cast down, afraid to meet the gaze of others, afraid they would see the brokenness I could no longer conceal. The grief was a physical weight, pressing against my lungs, making each breath an act of endurance rather than simple living. I thought this suffering would destroy me. I did not yet understand it would transform me instead. I know the burden you carry now, the loss that has left you hollow, the betrayal that has made trust seem like a distant shore you can no longer reach, the failure that repeats in your mind like an accuser that never tires, the addiction that has returned despite all your promises and prayers. I feel the heaviness in your heart as you wonder if healing is even possible after so much damage has been done. I want to ask you a question, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. Do you believe your wounds are punishment, or could they be pathways to a deeper understanding of yourself and the divine? If this question touches something real inside you, if you recognize this struggle between seeing pain as punishment or as passage, write in the comments, "My wounds are not my enemies." When you share this truth, you free not only yourself, but also give permission to others still walking in darkness to consider their suffering in a new light. In my deepest despair, after losing Shams, I encountered a poor man sitting by the road. His clothes were tattered, his feet bare and cracked from the dust of many journeys, yet his eyes held a serenity that startled me. I sat beside him, driven by a curiosity I could not name. We shared the simple bread I carried, and as the evening shadows lengthened, he told me his story without self-pity or embellishment. He had lost his family to illness, his home to fire, his livelihood to theft. With each blow, he had fallen to his knees, but always risen again. I asked him the secret of his resilience, and he smiled gently. "I stopped fighting against the wounds," he said. "I began listening to them instead." His words entered me like cool water poured into parched soil. I had been raging against my pain, treating it as an enemy to be conquered, a darkness to be banished. I had not considered it might be a teacher arriving in harsh disguise. That night in my chamber, I lit a single candle and sat with my grief as one might sit with an unexpected guest. I allowed it to speak. I heard not only its howl of anguish, but also its whisper of wisdom. The loss of Shams had shattered the container of who I thought I was, but in that shattering, something ancient and essential was being freed. God is not the author of your suffering, but He is the alchemist who can transmute it from poison to medicine. This is the counterintuitive truth that defies the logic of the world. Your wounds are not obstacles to spiritual growth. They are the very doorways through which deeper understanding enters. The crack in your heart is not a flaw to be hidden, but an opening to be widened until the light pours through. The parts of yourself you have judged as broken are precisely where divine mercy finds easiest entrance. Your vulnerability, which you have been taught to conceal, becomes your greatest strength when offered with honesty before the beloved. Try this practice when pain rises like a wave threatening to drown you. Place your hand on the exact spot in your body where you feel the hurt most intensely. Breathe slowly into that space. Instead of turning away from the sensation, turn toward it with gentle curiosity. Say to the pain, "What are you trying to teach me? What truth are you holding that I have been unwilling to see?" Then be still and listen without judgment. The answer may come as a word, an image, a memory, or simply a moment of clarity. This is not resignation to suffering, it is transformation through conscious presence. I spent months after that encounter gradually reframing my relationship with loss. Each time the grief would seize me, I would acknowledge its presence without resistance. I would bow to it as one bows to a stern teacher. Sometimes I would write letters to my pain as if addressing a complicated friend. Other times, I would take it with me to the marketplace, letting it accompany me through ordinary tasks, neither hiding from it nor letting it consume me. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the suffering changed. It did not disappear, but it became translucent, allowing glimpses of meaning to shine through its dark fabric. The healing of wounds does not always mean their disappearance. Sometimes it means their integration into a larger story of who you are becoming. The Japanese practice of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, highlighting rather than hiding the cracks. Your life is being repaired in similar fashion, with your wounds becoming the very places where divine light shines most visibly. The suffering that seems to be breaking you apart is actually breaking you open. The question is not whether you can avoid pain in this life, but whether you can allow it to serve its deeper purpose rather than merely endure it. Remember this truth I have witnessed in countless lives, including my own. God doesn't waste wounds. Every tear you shed waters the garden of your soul. Every night of confusion prepares the dawn of clarity. Every moment of honest reckoning with your brokenness creates space for authentic wholeness to emerge. The Beloved is not waiting for you to perfect yourself before approaching. He is present in the very midst of your imperfection, working with infinite patience to reveal the beauty that lies dormant within your struggles. Let me offer you an aphorism to carry like a small stone in your pocket. The heart that breaks completely breaks open completely. Write it where you will see it daily. Whisper it when shame tells you to hide your wounds or when despair suggests they define you. Neither is true. Your wounds are sacred geography on the map of your becoming. They mark not where you have failed, but where you have lived fully enough to be marked by life's depth. Honor them. Listen to them. Allow them to soften rather than harden you. This is the path of transformation that begins not with escape from suffering, but with brave presence within it. I have walked the narrow path between surrender and struggle, between accepting what cannot be changed and fighting to transform what can. The chains that bind you now, whether they are visible habits that return like unwelcome guests or invisible thoughts that circle like hungry wolves around your confidence, I know them well. I have felt the shame of relapse, the bitter taste of promise broken, the weight of potential unfulfilled. Before I became the teacher, others sought for wisdom. I was the student repeatedly failing my own examinations of character. Before the whirling dance of ecstasy, there were countless falls into the dust. There was a period in my life when I was consumed by intellectual pride. Though I studied the sacred texts and could recite verses with perfect pronunciation, though I led prayers and delivered sermons that impressed the learned men of Kanya, something essential was missing. Knowledge had become my addiction, recognition my drug of choice. I collected ideas like treasures, but lived none of them with authenticity. When Shams appeared in my life, he saw through this spiritual facade immediately. One day, he took my precious books and threw them into water. I watched in horror as the ink bled from the pages, as years of study seemed to dissolve before my eyes. "Now you must live what you have read," he said without apology. "Knowledge that remains only in the mind is a chain, not a key." This moment broke something in me, a vessel of false identity that had to shatter before true transformation could begin. I tell you this story not to glorify dramatic gestures, but to illustrate a fundamental truth. Sometimes what appears to be loss becomes liberation. The habits and attachments you struggle to break may actually be breaking you, restricting the flow of divine love through your being. The addiction that returns is not evidence of your weakness, but an invitation to discover a strength deeper than willpower, a freedom beyond mere control. If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. The path. Breaking chains requires paradoxical wisdom. You must acknowledge your powerlessness before discovering your true power. So many of us exhaust ourselves in cycles of determination and despair, promising change through sheer force of will, then collapsing into shame when our resolve inevitably wavers. I learned through painful repetition that this approach strengthens the very chains it seeks to break. The ego that declares, "I will never again," is the same ego that whispers, "Just once more won't hurt." True freedom begins with humble recognition of this pattern and the willingness to seek help beyond the limited self. Try this practice when you feel caught in the grip of compulsion, whether it is a substance that dulls your pain, a relationship that diminishes your spirit, or a thought pattern that poisons your peace. Place both feet firmly on the ground. Feel the solid earth supporting you. Take 3 slow breaths, allowing your body to soften with each exhale. Then, speak these words aloud, even in a whisper. I cannot break this chain alone. I open myself to help beyond my understanding. This simple act of honest surrender creates a crack in the fortress of isolation where addiction thrives. It acknowledges both your limitation and the limitless resources available when you allow yourself to become receptive. After the incident with the books, I entered a period of profound disorientation. The identity I had constructed so carefully lay in ruins around me. I still craved the recognition of scholars, still measured my worth by the standards of worldly achievement. The old habits of mind would return like faithful servants each morning, offering the familiar comfort of intellectual superiority, the momentary pleasure of being admired for what I knew rather than how I lived. Breaking these chains required more than a single dramatic moment. It demanded daily practice of a new way of being. I began sitting in silence each dawn, not to acquire new knowledge, but to observe the quality of my own awareness. I noticed how quickly my mind would run toward judgment, comparison, acquisition. Instead of fighting these tendencies directly, I would simply watch them arise and pass like clouds across the sky of consciousness. I practiced seeing without immediately grasping, hearing without instantly interpreting, feeling without automatically reacting. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the space between stimulus and response widened. In that space, a new freedom began to flower. Here is a truth that contradicts conventional wisdom, but aligns with spiritual reality. The way to break a chain is not by pulling harder against it, but by ceasing to feed the energy that maintains its hold. Addiction, whether to substances, behaviors, or thought patterns, thrives on opposition. What you resist not only persists, but often strengthens. The alternative is not passive acceptance, but active presence. When you bring full, compassionate awareness to the very impulse you wish to transcend, something miraculous occurs. The compulsion begins to lose its solidity. The chain reveals itself as less fixed than you imagined. God resides in this space of honest observation, this tender witnessing of your own struggle without condemnation. The divine is not found in perfect achievement or flawless behavior, but in the courageous willingness to face yourself exactly as you are in this moment, neither exaggerating your failures nor denying your capacity for growth. In my own journey, I discovered that God was not waiting for me to break my chains before approaching. Rather, His presence was the very force that gently dissolved the links, one conscious breath at a time. Remember this aphorism I have crafted from years of watching souls struggle and ultimately find freedom. The chain you fight against tightens its grip. The chain you illuminate with awareness begins to rust and crumble. This is not mystical thinking, but practical wisdom. Awareness itself is transformative. The habit brought fully into consciousness already begins to change its nature. The compulsion met with curiosity rather than condemnation gradually loses its hypnotic power. The practice of breaking chains is not a battle to be won through force, but a dance to be learned through patience. There will be days of stunning clarity when freedom seems fully realized, followed by moments when old patterns return with disheartening familiarity. Do not let this cyclical nature of transformation discourage you. The spiral path upward includes passages that seem to revisit old territory, yet each return occurs from a slightly higher perspective. You are not failing, you are learning. You are not weak, you are human. And in that very humanity, with all its glorious imperfection, the divine seeks expression. Trust the wisdom of the process unfolding within you, the chains loosening their hold, the habits gradually losing their compulsive grip, the thoughts slowly surrendering their tyranny over your peace. This liberation occurs not according to your timetable, but according to a deeper rhythm you are only beginning to perceive. God's patience is infinite. Can you extend some measure of that same patience toward yourself? This too is spiritual practice. This too is the breaking of an invisible chain. This too is the dance of love with the beloved who has never stopped believing in the beauty of your complete freedom. The path to wholeness is paved not with grand gestures, but with small faithfulness. I learned this truth during a bitter winter in Kenya, when the sun seemed to have abandoned the sky, and the cold entered not just the body but the spirit. My prayers had become mechanical, my writing without inspiration, my teaching a repetition of words that no longer carried fire. I looked at my life and saw disorder spreading like weeds in a once-tended garden. Sleep came when it wished, meals were taken without gratitude, possessions scattered in neglect. This outer chaos mirrored an inner fragmentation that left me drifting from moment to moment without anchor or direction. One dawn, too restless for sleep, yet too weary for proper devotion, I wandered to the small stream that flowed near my home. The water moved with quiet purpose beneath a thin crust of ice, faithful to its nature despite the season of hardship. I watched as it navigated stones and fallen branches, neither fighting against these obstacles nor surrendering its essential journey. Something in this simple witnessing broke through the fog of my disorientation. I realized I had been seeking dramatic revelation while neglecting the humble discipline that prepares the soil for growth. I had wanted God to appear in thunder while ignoring his presence in the rhythm of ordinary days. That morning I began a practice so simple it seemed almost foolish to my educated mind. Upon waking, before prayer or study or conversation, I would make my bed with complete attention. Every corner of the blanket smoothed, every wrinkle in the pillow addressed, every object returned to its proper place. At first, this act felt meaningless against the magnitude of my spiritual questions. Yet I continued, day after day, allowing this small discipline to become an anchor for my drifting consciousness. Gradually, I added other practices, washing each dish immediately after use, sweeping the floor at the same hour each afternoon, writing 3 lines of gratitude before sleep, whether inspiration was present or not. The transformation came slowly, almost imperceptibly. But one morning I noticed that prayer came more easily. Words flowed again in my writing. Teaching felt less like performance and more like transmission of living truth. The discipline of ordering my external world had quietly restored order to my internal landscape. I understood then what desert fathers and devoted mothers have always known. Faithfulness in small things precedes faithfulness in great ones. The path to spiritual ecstasy passes through the territory of mundane discipline. This truth contradicts our constant hunger for the spectacular. We search for God in mountaintop experiences while he waits patiently to meet us in the valley of daily faithfulness. Try this practice for 7 days without interruption. Choose one simple act of order that you will complete at the same time each day, regardless of mood or circumstance. It might be making your bed with full attention, or arranging your shoes neatly at the door, or clearing your table of the day's accumulation before sleep. As you perform this act, stay fully present. Feel the textures beneath your fingers. Notice the subtle satisfaction as order emerges from disorder. Breathe consciously, allowing each inhale to draw in divine presence, each exhale to release resistance. This is not merely housekeeping, it is soul-keeping. This small faithfulness creates a sanctuary where deeper transformation becomes possible. God is present in this discipline, though not in ways the ego craves. We search for divine confirmation through emotional experience, through signs and wonders, through instant liberation from our struggles. Meanwhile, the beloved waits in the humble soil of routine faithfulness, in the quiet satisfaction of promises kept, in the gentle rhythm of life lived with intention rather than reaction. I discovered this truth through disappointment when the spiritual fireworks I sought failed to appear despite my fervent prayers. It was in the aftermath of this disappointment, in the embrace of simple discipline, that I found not what I wanted, but what I truly needed. During this period of my life, a young disciple approached me, his face tight with frustration. "Master," he said, "I have prayed for months for God to remove my anger, yet it still rises in me like a sudden storm. I have begged for peace, yet my mind continues its restless wandering. Perhaps God does not hear me, or perhaps I am unworthy of transformation." I recognized in his words my own impatience, my own demand for immediate results. I asked him to walk with me to the garden where fruit trees grew in neat rows. "Did these trees bear fruit the day after planting?" I asked. He shook his head. "Yet the gardener continues to tend them daily, trusting the slow process of growth that happens largely unseen. Your spiritual practice is no different." Remember this aphorism I now share with those caught in the tension between spiritual ambition and human limitation. Patience is not waiting for the storm to pass, but learning to tend your garden while it rains. The discipline of the heart is precisely this tending, this faithful presence to the small acts that gradually align our outer life with our inner values. The miraculous transformation you seek will come not through extraordinary intervention, but through ordinary faithfulness, not through escape from your humanity, but through its patient refinement. The secret of the saints and mystics is not their superiority to mundane concerns, but their capacity to infuse mundane actions with sacred attention. The mother changing a diaper with complete presence, the farmer planting seeds with reverent hands, the worker completing each task with integrity, the artist attending to each brushstroke with total focus, all participate in divine work as surely as the monk in deepest meditation. I came to understand that my writing flowed not despite my practice of ordinary discipline, but because of it. My teaching carried fire not in opposition to daily routine, but as its natural flowering. Trust this counterintuitive wisdom. The extraordinary spiritual experiences you seek often arrive through the doorway of ordinary faithfulness. The discipline that feels like constraint actually creates the conditions for true freedom. The routine that seems to limit spontaneity actually prepares the ground for authentic inspiration. God has placed the seeds of your transformation not in distant realms requiring special access, but in the fertile soil of your daily life, waiting only for the water of your attention and the sunlight of your consistent care. Begin where you are. Tend what has been given to you. The garden of your becoming will grow according to a wisdom greater than your understanding, but requiring your faithful participation. The question that haunts your sleepless nights is the same one that once kept me pacing the floors of my home in Kenya. Why am I here? What purpose does my life serve in this vast universe? I remember the weight of this uncertainty, how it pressed against my chest like a stone, how it turned ordinary days into a desert of meaningless activity. I had achieved recognition as a scholar, secured position as a teacher, provided for my family through respectable work. Yet beneath these accomplishments lay a persistent emptiness, a sense that I was living someone else's story rather than the one inscribed in my soul before birth. The world speaks of purpose as if it were a destination to reach, a role to fulfill, a contribution to make. It tells you to search for your passion, to discover your talents, to find that singular vocation that will justify your existence and secure your belonging. This desperate seeking keeps you running in circles, evaluating each possibility against impossible standards, rejecting the humble gifts of the present moment while pursuing some imagined future state of clarity and fulfillment. I know this exhausting pursuit because I lived it, measuring my worth by what I produced rather than by the quality of presence I brought to each breath. The turning point came unexpectedly. Not through revelation on a mountaintop, but through surrender in the valley of ordinary life. I was teaching a group of students, reciting passages I had explained hundreds of times before, when suddenly I became aware of the miracle taking place in that simple exchange. The air entering and leaving my lungs without my conscious control. The light flowing through the windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in patterns never to be repeated. The faces before me, each containing worlds of experience unknown even to themselves. The words passing between us, carrying meanings that would continue to unfold long after our gathering dispersed. In that moment, purpose was not something to seek, but something to notice. Not a future achievement, but a present awakening to the extraordinary gift of being alive. God does not wait for you to find your purpose before drawing near. The divine presence permeates your existence now, whether you sense it or not, whether your life matches your ambitions or falls painfully short. The beloved does not require grand achievements to deem you worthy of love. Your purpose is not primarily about what you do, but about how fully you show up for this one precious life you have been given. This truth reverses the common understanding that sees purpose as prerequisite for meaning. It is presence that precedes purpose, attention that precedes achievement, gratitude that precedes greatness. Try this practice when anxiety about your life's direction threatens to pull you into either frantic activity or paralyzed inaction. For 5 minutes, narrow your focus to just this moment. Feel the weight of your body against the chair or floor. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Listen to the most subtle sound in your environment. Place one hand on your heart and silently offer thanks for its faithful beating without requiring your conscious command. Then ask yourself, what small act of beauty or service is possible right now? Perhaps it's writing a note of encouragement to someone in need. Perhaps it's arranging objects on your desk with care and intention. Perhaps it's simply smiling at the next person you encounter with complete presence. Purpose reveals itself not in grand revelations, but in these mindful responses to life's immediate invitations. During a period of intense questioning about my own path, I met an elderly potter in the marketplace of Konya. His hands were cracked and calloused, stained with decades of clay and glaze. I watched as he centered a lump of earth on his wheel, and with gentle pressure transformed it into a vessel of surprising beauty. When I complimented his skill, his eyes crinkled with quiet joy. "For 40 years I have made pots," he said. "Some days the clay speaks easily, some days it fights my hands. But I have learned that my task is not to force the clay into submission, but to enter into conversation with its nature." He paused, wiping his hands on his apron. Perhaps life asks the same of us, not to impose our will upon it, but to discover what it wishes to become through us. His words stayed with me, gradually reshaping my understanding of purpose. I had been treating my life as raw material to be forced into a shape predetermined by my ego or by social expectations. I had not considered that my deepest purpose might emerge through receptivity rather than control, through listening rather than demanding, through collaboration with a wisdom greater than my limited understanding. The question shifted from, "What do I want to do with my life?" to, "What does life want to do through me?" This subtle reframing opened a door to a more spacious understanding of purpose, one that honored both my unique gifts and their place within a larger tapestry. Remember this aphorism that came to me during dawn prayer, when the first light was just beginning to soften the darkness. Your purpose is not a point to reach, but a presence to embody. Let these words accompany you through days of doubt and nights of questioning. Let them remind you that purpose is not something you manufacture through effort, but something you uncover through attention. You are not the author of your soul's highest calling, but its faithful translator, listening for the particular way divine love seeks expression through your unique constellation of gifts, wounds, experiences, and limitations. The marketplace teaches that purpose must be productive, measurable, impressive to others. The soul knows that purpose might be as quiet as tending a garden no one else will see, as subtle as offering quality of attention to a child who will not remember the interaction, as seemingly small as creating beauty that will outlast you in ways you cannot trace. I have come to believe that our deepest purpose often reveals itself in what we do naturally, almost without thinking, in how we uniquely reflect divine qualities into the world through our most authentic ways of being. This understanding liberates us from the tyranny of significance that plagues modern hearts. You need not change the world to justify your existence. You need not achieve greatness by external standards to fulfill your soul's purpose. What if the most profound purpose of your life is to learn to love well, to cultivate presence, to grow in compassion, to create small moments of beauty and connection in a fractured world? These purposes are available not someday, but this day, not through extraordinary circumstances, but through the holy ground of ordinary life. Trust the unfolding wisdom of your path, even and especially when it makes no sense to your calculating mind. The detours that seem to delay your arrival at some imagined destination are often the very experiences preparing you for a purpose greater than you could have planned. The limitations that appear to restrict your options may actually be narrowing your focus to the particular contribution only you can make. God has not forgotten you. Your life is not a cosmic accident. Your purpose is being revealed not despite the confusion, but often through it, as you learn to surrender the illusion of control and open to the mystery of becoming. The deepest transformation happens not through force, but through surrender, not through acquisition, but through release. I learned this truth not in moments of success, but in the crucible of apparent failure, when all I had constructed collapsed around me. It was after losing Shams, after the unraveling of my carefully crafted identity as respected scholar and teacher, after nights of weeping that seemed to have no end, that I discovered a paradox at the heart of spiritual awakening. We must be emptied before we can be filled. We must die to who we thought we were before we can be born into who we truly are. I remember walking along the edge of a field outside Konya, my heart heavy with grief, my mind circling in questions without answers. The wheat had been harvested, leaving only stubble under the autumn sun. The barrenness of the landscape mirrored my inner desolation. I knelt and took a handful of soil, letting it sift through my fingers, wondering how anything could grow from such emptiness. An old farmer approached, nodding at my evident distress. "Do not worry for the field," he said, misunderstanding my sorrow. "What looks like death is merely preparation. The earth must rest before it can bring forth new life." He moved on, unaware that his simple wisdom had illuminated not just agricultural cycles, but the very process unfolding within my soul. Transformation rarely announces itself with trumpets and celebration. More often it arrives disguised as disappointment, as the collapse of what we thought we wanted or needed, as the painful recognition that the path we have been traveling leads nowhere. I had prayed for God to make me a great teacher, to fill my classes with devoted students, to spread my name far beyond the borders of Konya. The divine response was to empty me of ambition, to strip away my attachment to recognition, to reduce me to the essential core of being that remains when all external validations have been removed. Only then, in that fertile emptiness, could a deeper teaching emerge. God works in your life not according to the logic of acquisition, but according to the wisdom of transformation. The divine is less concerned with your comfort than with your awakening, less invested in your success by worldly standards than in your capacity to embody love in all circumstances. This truth contradicts our cultural programming, which measures progress by accumulation, whether of possessions, achievements, experiences, or even spiritual insights. The authentic spiritual journey moves in the opposite direction, toward simplicity, toward essence, toward the recognition that what you seek through endless striving has been present all along in the depths of your being. Try this practice when you find yourself caught in the grip of craving or ambition, constantly reaching for the next achievement, experience, or acquisition. Sit quietly and bring to mind something you already possess but take for granted. Perhaps the miracle of your breath, flowing in and out without your conscious control. Perhaps the gift of clean water flowing from your tap. Perhaps the shelter of your home, however humble or imperfect it may be. Place your hand on your heart and say with full presence, "This is enough, I am enough, this moment is complete." Repeat this practice whenever you notice yourself falling into the trance of more that keeps you constantly straining toward a future that never arrives while missing the abundance already present. During the period of my deepest transformation, a wealthy merchant sought my counsel, his face lined with discontent despite his obvious prosperity. "I have acquired everything I once dreamed of," he confessed, "yet satisfaction eludes me. Each achievement merely spawns hunger for the next. Each possession loses its luster as soon as it is obtained. I fear I am cursed to remain forever unsatisfied." I recognized in his words the universal human condition, the endless cycle of craving and temporary fulfillment that keeps us orbiting around an illusory center rather than resting in our true nature. I shared with him not philosophical concepts, but a simple practice: to spend 10 minutes each morning contemplating one ordinary blessing in his life with complete attention, allowing gratitude to arise naturally from this contemplation. Weeks later he returned. Something changed in his countenance. "The practice seems too simple to explain the effect," he said, wonder in his voice. "Yet I find myself less driven by acquisition, more present to the beauty already surrounding me. It is as if a space has opened within me, a stillness from which I can witness the constant movement of desire without being consumed by it." What this merchant discovered is the transformation that occurs not through adding more, but through perceiving differently, not through extraordinary experiences, but through extraordinary attention to the ordinary. Remember this aphorism that came to me during a night of prayer when the stars seemed close enough to touch. The soul transformed sees with new eyes what was always present. This is the miracle available to you now, regardless of your circumstances. The shift from endless seeking to grateful recognition, from restless craving to peaceful presence, from scattered attention to focused awareness. This transformation does not depend on changing your external conditions, though such changes may naturally flow from your shifted perception. It begins with the revolutionary act of being fully present to what is, rather than constantly reaching for what is not. The spiritual marketplace sells techniques promising dramatic experiences, instant enlightenment, supernatural abilities. I, too, was seduced by the search for the spectacular, measuring my progress by the intensity of mystical states or the eloquence of insights received in meditation. What I eventually discovered through hard-earned wisdom is that the most profound transformation happens not in peak experiences, but in the valley of ordinary life, where moment by moment we practice choosing love over fear, presence over distraction, acceptance over resistance, generosity over protection. These simple choices, made thousands of times in the laboratory of daily existence, gradually reshape the very structure of our consciousness. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation. And leave in the comments, "I embrace the sacred ordinary." This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. God awaits you not in some distant future when you have accumulated enough spiritual experiences or purified yourself of all flaws, but in this very moment, in the breath you are taking, in the sensations moving through your body, in the awareness reading these words. The transformation you seek is not primarily about becoming someone different, but about recognizing who you have been all along, beneath the layers of conditioning and forgetting. Trust the Wisdom of the process unfolding within you, even when progress seems imperceptible or when old patterns reassert themselves after periods of clarity. Transformation is rarely linear. It moves in cycles like the seasons, with periods of visible growth and periods of apparent dormancy that mask essential development occurring beneath the surface. Your task is not to force the process, but to create conditions that support it through practices of presence, gratitude, and loving awareness. Just as the farmer prepares the soil but cannot command the seed to sprout, you create the conditions for transformation while surrendering the outcome to a wisdom greater than your own understanding. The paradox at the heart of spiritual awakening is that what you most deeply seek, you already are. The peace that seems to elude you is your true nature, temporarily obscured by the activity of an untrained mind. The love you hunger for flows from the very center of your being, when you stop obstructing it through fear and judgment. The wisdom you search for in books and teachers already whispers within you, waiting only for the quieting of mental noise to make itself heard. This is the transformative truth hidden in plain sight. You are not broken seeking wholeness. You are wholeness temporarily believing in brokenness. And in the recognition of this truth, everything changes while nothing changes at all.